In a world of fractured stories, timelines buried, and truths erased, one project dares to ask the question, what if everything you thought you knew about history was wrong? This is GTR, Genesis, Timeline and Roots. A 5,025-year simulated walkthrough tracing a melanated Adam back to 4000 BC. Over the last decade, new revelations confirm a black origin for humanity, from European vaults to tribal memory, Babylon to Britain. This is not just history, this is a challenge, a simulation, a movement. Meet the man behind GTR, Dr. Wilton MacDonald II, Caymanian, British, Jamaican, haplogroup E and stateless for 26 years. Now a global explorer, 119 countries and counting. A hedge fund lawyer, a UK chartered accountant, a seeker of the lost archives of our people. But the question remains, if all black people came out of Africa, does that make us only African? Or are we also European, Scottish, Native American, Jacobite Hebrew, Asian? GTR exists to answer that question. You've felt it your entire life, that there's something wrong with the world. A splinter in your mind. That splinter has brought you here, to GTR. Whites can't trace their roots before the 1800s. Where's ours? Where are the tribes? The languages, the kings, the queens, the true Hebrews? Where did the giants go? Where are the Neanderthals? Angels, aliens? Why do we speak in so many tongues? Was Babel just a myth? A memory? History has holes. Hollywood has lied. The system was never made for us to remember. Only 5 to 8% of people today are white. And what about the 1800 stories and postcards of the cabbage babies? But nearly all history books center their story. That doesn't add up. Atlantis, lost cities, vanished civilizations, or were they erased? Try GTR. Take the red pill and awaken to the truth of your ancestors. Or take the blue pill and keep dreaming a fantasy. GTR. A simulated walkthrough of Black Hebrew history and eschatology. This is the beginning of remembering.
Hi, well, welcome to another episode of GTR, Genesis, Timeline and Roots. This is Dr. Wilton MacDonald, and I'm pleased to be joined by Anita Wills. Anita Wills, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, well, you lead in. I mean, I wanted to just to tell our audience that I've really read up on your books, on your work on the Native and true Native Americans and their history. And I wanted to hear firsthand your bio, and as you have published, you have witnessed, you have family members connected to the Americas. Why not you take the stage and tell us a bit about yourself and your background?
Yes, my name is Anita Wills, and I'm an author. I'm an activist. I'm a mother and a grandmother, a great grandmother. And I was born and raised in Chester County, Pennsylvania. We lived in that region, or I lived in that region until I was like in my 20s and I moved to California. But in that area, I was my mother's oldest daughter. So I spent a lot of time with her. Like she taught me, how to, what to do as far as in the kitchen, how to cook, how to do stuff that, that women did back there in the 50s. My brothers were with my father, who was teaching them what men did, So they went fishing and they did a lot of other stuff. But my mother and I spent a lot of time together. And I think to keep me from being bored with the cooking and all that stuff, she would tell me stories to keep me, from whining about my chores. And so she started telling me stories about our ancestors. And one of them was about the African. Her name was Leah, and how she came here and she was brought as a slave to the Americas. And she told me that story. But she also told me about our ancestors who were in that region, who were Native American. My mother knew when everybody came into the area where we lived, Chester County is like one of the oldest counties in the country. It was one of the original counties outside of Philadelphia. And so everybody, all of the, like the French that would come in, they would come through Chester County. All the, when the colonizers started coming in, even before William Penn, they were coming to Chester County, and they were either killing off or intermixing with the natives that were there. And my mom said those are our people. Our people are the natives that were here, and they were run off by the Europeans that came, by the colonizers that came. So she told me that history, and I asked her, where are they? She said they're all gone. And then, and then she was telling me about our ancestors in the Civil War, out of Chester County, out of Pennsylvania. And when I start, the stories that she was telling me stuck with me. She knew when everybody came in, like a lot of the streets were named after white people. She said they didn't even come here until 1910 or 1920s or whatever. So the stories about who was there when were passed down. And she said,
maybe that's a good way to kind of just interrupt when I said colonizers, because our notion of colonizers and part of our work in the GTR is that we paint with a broad brush that they were white people as colonizers. And even the statue of John Harvard at Harvard University, it's called the Statue of Three Lies. They still don't know for sure what John Harvard looked like. So the colonizers, for me, based on research, it's Euromoors, Black Euromoors versus those in the West who are, again, melanated people. So people don't want to say Black, but just say melanated people on both sides of the Atlantic. So but this is the description that's lost in the history books.
Well, one of our ancestors who were in the mountains were the Greens, and they went up. They have unknown origins, but they are brown skinned, copper skinned people, and they said, well, they're Africans or whatever. But my belief is that they came in on the ship with there's the captain that was a pirate. And he came into Pennsylvania, and he went to this place. Him and all his men would get off the ship. And we believe that line, the Greens got off that ship with that captain and remained in the region. And they called them, they were calling them Negroes or whatever, but they were in a mix. They were the ones that I believe are the Moors. And they mixed with the natives that were in the mountains. They went up in the mountains and became a part of the what they call the triracial isolates. And my ancestor, who was in the Civil War, Henry Green, they said he had an anchor on his arm. He had anchor on both arms. And that's something that somebody who's a seaman does. They put anchors on their, on their arms. But that's what they said that he did. And his father, who was up in the mountains, would go and build wagons, and he would go down to Philadelphia to meet the ships and get stuff and sell it to the people in the interior. So they don't know really where they came from. I was believing that they were that they were native, but I think when they were talking about that captain, I forgot his name, but he's one of the famous captains of the ship there was a pirate ship. And it docked at Philadelphia, and the men would come up into the interior of Pennsylvania. And I believe that that's where those ancestors came from. And they were intermixed with the natives up there. They jumped ship, or they just never, or they just remained there because they're not Africans. There's no history in our family about the Greens. Their surname was Green being African. There is history of Moors being in Delaware, and in Philadelphia.
And I would say, Anita, why is it that I grew up in the West too, grew up in the Caribbean, and went to school in part in the US. Why do you think that there's just not one single community that's speaking an African language or dialect? Just anyone in the whole of the Caribbean and the Americas. I can't find one town, one village, one place that is still speaking an African language or dialect.
Yeah, neither can I. I mean, I only found my ancestor that my mother told me about, but she was brought here in 1830. She was brought from Guinea in 1830, and slavery had ended by then. So she had to go to the islands. They took her to the islands, and then they sold her as a Caribbean slave. But she's the only one that identifies herself as an African. I haven't been able to trace any of my other ancestors back to Africa. I traced an ancestor, his name was Aminadab Booker, back to England. He came from England, and he was sent as an indentured servant from England.
I described him from records. What did he look like?
They said that he was a dark-skinned man. They called him they didn't even call him a Negro. They were just saying, this is this servant, the man in England that sent him as an indentured servant to America in the maybe the 1700s, the late 1700s. He said, he has been my faithful servant. He is not a slave. He is to serve an indenture and to be freed and to be paid. And the census records identifies him as a Black man, but it was identifying my native ancestors as Black, and after he was free in 1811, they were called free persons of color. So they did not describe him as an African in any of the records that I have seen. And I tend to believe he was born in England. He was a Moor.
And we have this program, Roots, by Alex Haley. Tell me, what is the thing and how do you perceive that? Because I have my own very strong views on that program. What do you think about that story is presented in Roots by Alex Haley?
Now I think it was just a wonderful fiction book made up of stereotypes of us as Africans, of what happened coming from, how they were brought from Africa. I don't see it as, I haven't had one African tell me, oh, that's how we were. I haven't had one African say that to me. And they're on the continent. And that's how we live. My ancestor that came from Africa, that was brought as a slave from Africa, was literate. Her father was a Muslim. She said, oh, my dad was an imam. She knew that they took her 5 miles down the road. She knew it was the Dutch people that did it. She knew that she was in Bermuda. She was not a savage, somebody living like an animal in Africa. They were from Mali. They are Malinke. They are the people from Mali who were highly advanced. They were not, none of what they were portraying. In Roots, none of that.
Yeah, Alex Haley was really disgraced. He paid money out of court. He was a plagiarist, and the way it's portrayed, even his name, his surname, his paternal name is Bao, and it's German-based, Black German, and Haley was a maternal name, so it wasn't a strict paternal line. So he is a Bao. And the Kunta Kinte connection was supposedly on the mother's side, and there were holes. There were definitely meandering, just question marks on his tracing of history, and that he was so strong as to carving out a role for people who are just dismissive of Euromores, because during this time when Kunta was supposedly brought over, the Euromores were ruling. We get the sense that the presidents of the United States, the first 4, it's argued that they were melanated. The wives were called brunettes. They were actually called brunettes, and so part of the mission of GTR is to present this timeline, a timeline of history that goes back for 5,000 years, and where we're trying to ascertain truth and historical accuracy. There's such a thing as historical accuracy. So Ruth, I'm largely dismissed, and about the stories and the origins of whites. I mean, I really want to do a separate program on those orphans, they call it the cabbage babies, and I think that it's a topic to be explored because of the thousands of postcards that are emerging from the 1800s before there had any major wars. Certainly before World War I and II, and they had a lot of kids that were left behind because parents died, and then they died in the face of the war. But how can you have so many babies and listed in Sears Roebuck for $3 a baby and self-delivered to your doorstep? How come you had that going on? Where did they come from? And mind you, the nursing of by black women nursing babies, especially white babies, that happened. They said it happened from slavery days, and I'm arguing that this would have grown in prominence from the 1800s. It certainly around the whole mammy and umami. What's your take on that, on the whole breastfeeding by black melanated women? Have you seen records where it stretches, even before 1800s?
About nursing their babies?
Nursing babies, especially nursing white babies, nursing babies. Have you seen records of these called mammies? They were used against their will. They didn't volunteer. They certainly neglected their own kids, and they were sometimes, in many cases, forced in order to breastfeed white kids. So did you come across any of these women who were either volunteered to be mammies for milk production, or they were forced to do so? Did you come across any of those in your history?
No, I haven't seen anything like that in the history books.
Yeah, because we see it on film too, but we see it and recorded it, that they were the so-called thing as mammies. I mean,
right.
their children were being nursed and suckled by women, black women, who, curiously, we know the strong genes that play, the Eve genes that goes back to the beginning. So why is it that it was such a practice in Europe, even in the UK, in Europe, and in the USA? Why did you have this sort of mammy league of breastfeeding black women?
I would think that if it was happening, it's because of our what's in the breast milk, and it's the healing qualities. That's what I would think if it's happening.
True.
Yeah.
I mean, they said it went way back into slavery, but the timeline for me, it's something that we need to flesh out. A lot of Christians feel that we have around 6,000 years, but I would go and challenge that, because part of that 6,000 years to Adam, we know the imagery in the typical churches, the churches of Latter-day Saints, Mormons, even the Adventists, and I fall within the category of Adventism. We have the imagery of all the ancient people, even before, Putin declared his Russian icons and declared black images of the saints and figures in the Bible. We have a sense from the local Christian mainstream media. You could look at Wikipedia, even the figure of King David, and you can see that they're clearly, say, just depicted as white, when we know today the numbers don't support. It's 5 to 8%. It's no more than 8% non-Hispanic global whites, and it's shocking that we continue to show the imagery and iconography with this clearly whitewashed images going back to David, BC 1000. So we talk about clearly, I reckon 2,000 years ago to David, or the Christians would say 3,000 years to David, because they're counting the 1,000 years dark ages. We skipped 1,000 years from 582 became 1582, courtesy of the Vatican. So that's part of that I am chipping away and doing at GTR, to try and set a uniform and consistent, simulated timeline of events, how we got here, and what were the driving forces, what were the origins of mankind, what did mankind look like, and it's fighting against different competing themes, like in evolution. I mean, we know that one basic stat would debunk that. What happened even 1,000 years ago during the time of Christ? Okay, and some people say, well, 2,000 years ago. But during the time of Christ, the United Nations has confirmed that we had 150 million to 190 million. So you split the difference, 170 million people. How long does it take to make 170 million people? That's where I get off, the rails. Well, evolutionist, it is nonsensical. What you're putting forth and trying to posit doesn't make any sense, because, how long does it really take again to create? We did 8 billion people inside of a very short time, 1,000 to 1,000 years. They said 2,000 years, we did 8 billion. But going back to whether you're starting, if you're looking at 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago, time of Christ, you're looking at 170 million people on the planet. How long does it take to make, and what would those people look like? And if those people are looking quite on the lighter side, Why is
Right.
it that today we have, out of 8 billion, barely 600 million
Yes.
Hispanic whites? I mean, some of these questions need to be addressed
Yes.
and the task, because we get the sense that all these museum paintings, I mean, look, take my namesake, McDonald's. The whole clan McDonald now, since March, they're privately for sale.
Mhm.
They're selling Armadale, they're selling the lands, they're selling the whole kitchen sink, they're selling. And I press them and say, well, if you're truly, and I visited Armadale in Scotland, if you're truly McDonald's, how come we don't have more, whites that would look like you, and you, not only you ruled, but you ruled the planet at some stage. These were global kings,
Right.
conquering everywhere, literally spreading their seed everywhere. How come we don't have more? And how come the numbers are so thin that they're not challenged? They're not challenged. And everything that has happened to melanated folk in the last 400, 500 years, it's ghastly. I've been told that a conservative number would be 200 million. Now, help me with that, Anita. Help me with that. I read the span of just, again, it goes to GTR because we're about Genesis timeline and an established timeline and also roots. But if you look back and you would say that, okay, during this period of, 500 years, whether you believe and subscribe to the transatlantic slave trade, and I think that some persons came from West Africa, it'll be foolish to miss the whole lot, but not in the millions. They couldn't find the boats, the insurance records are naughty. They have 19,000 recorded African names in the archives in DC. Again, they can't find 1% of the boats. And the logistics of it, to strap someone down and people down for 3 months, and the sickness, the illness, the conditions, you would have to be
superhuman
to endure and withstand medicine and proper food. Just off and ridiculous. So when you look at this in totality, when you examine it, what would you think about when I say, well, 200 million persons died who were melanated, and if they were alive, your population would be well beyond 12 billion. It's a matter of grossing up, because during the 1700s, you had 600 million and change. And if you went from 600 million in the span of 300 years, you're at 8 billion. There's no way to deny that our population would, of course, be a lot bigger, near somewhere 11, 12 billion, and then mostly Black. And that would, if we're a majority, if we're like 4 billion Black today, if that many people were allowed to live, and especially during Jim Crow, it was a nasty period of prison, imprisonment, Jim Crow, caused lynchings, and all these things happened. Look what happened to Emmett Till, and people don't remember to this day that ghastly things happen, even things that are not documented, took place and they happened. So what would you say on a number like 200 million of Indigenous people expired and being unalived in the last 400 years?
What would I say?
What would you say?
Being killed by the so-called Europeans?
So-called black Euromores, most part. Black crime. What do you say about numbers? The numbers.
My opinion about them, period, is controversial, because I don't even believe those people in Europe would have survived had it not been for the Moors teaching them how to bathe and how to put plumbing, how to stop passing, urinating on the street and throwing feces in the street. I don't even think those people who are a minority on this planet would have survived had it not been for Black people, for the Moors. They surely would have not. They thought the earth was flat. The Moors told them it was round. The Moors taught them shipping. Had it not, and even today when I'm here in the United States and I'm watching some of the crazy stuff that's going on, it's always some people of color jumping up and supporting the crazy stuff that these people do. If they were not supporting them, they would not be the so-called rulers of this, whatever they are, of this world. That's what I think about it.
Well, you know what? I take the points, and I have some doubts on what is portrayed about the Moors, because the Moors weren't people from Africa who just decided to have a nice little vacation and enter into Europe, and then they were forced out and they left. Why would you build? Because there was some sophistication and artistry. There were colleges, there were aqueducts, there were castles. There was a lot of stonework that was done in that medieval Europe, in those olden, 500, 700 years ago. How could these people were able to construct all these beautiful buildings, campuses, and had a sophisticated dealings? How can you reconcile that behavior to throwing your garbage and waste on the street? The way the history is told to us, it doesn't make sense. Because when you have a certain sophistication and intelligence, you'd say, well, cause and effect. I put this in the street. What's gonna? And then it's too much of it.
Right.
Common sense. You have a certain air of sophistication and knowledge. You know that there's bacteria. It's good for the field, but it's not good for the road.
Right.
It just the way in which you describe things. It doesn't hold a lot of water. So that's just my. The Moors were there, and it's probably a red herring, or it's a red herring misnomer, almost borderline derogatory term, because it means that we are trying to create a spot in history, a sort of existence. They want to create some kind of earlier existence and peg their own history to that without having to mention the inconvenient truth of cabbage babies. Right. Because once you acknowledge cabbage babies, there's no connection to Adam. There's no connection to the root of humanity. Right. There is a separate new route path in which people falling in that subset they would follow, and that's not good, because there's assertion and their dominance in landowning, in properties, in control. If truly the indigenous people, how can you claim ownership? How are you able to assert this kind of ownership and control?
Right. Because, so my mother's DNA, my maternal DNA, left North Africa and went over the Iberian Peninsula into what is now Spain over 25,000 years or so ago. So they were considered the first European. That line is a female line. They remained there. I communicated with a DNA cousin in Belarusia, and she was saying, yes, our people were there, and they were run out by during the Inquisition. So they had to be there for quite a while. That was a long time. And my particular line left and went through Italy, France, and Switzerland, and wound up in Britain. They were the original inhabitants, or the Welsh people were the original inhabitants of Britain, what was then Britain. So they went there, and they were a dark people, the only remains that they found, or mummy they found, is a black man called the Cheddar Man. With so these were dark-skinned people.
And blue eyes, piercing blue eyes. But the timeline, again, going to the timeline, the thousands and thousands of years.
Right.
Go back to those simple numbers. If you have 170, we call it split the difference, 170 million during the time of Christ.
Right.
It didn't lend to this long-winded existence, which it spans thousands of years. We're talking about literally 5,000 years, 5,025 years to be precise, roughly from today to Adam. So when you try to drag it out, there's a whole host of problems can creep in, and things just don't make sense. Like the population numbers, shouldn't we have more? Yes, we didn't have the medicines maybe 2,000 years ago, but they had a higher standard of living. They had a higher quality of living and lifestyle. The earth was not so polluted. Imagine the kind of toxicity that exists on this earth.
Yeah.
And people struggle with having kids, and they have to, go for in vitro just to try and conceive. This is the reality. Yes, people were not working the typical 9-to-5 jobs, and they didn't have sophisticated open heart surgery maybe in 2,000 plus years ago, but they were still able to accomplish great feats. I mean, look at the pyramids, look at wonders around the world done, and it is done with just the marvel, like even the pyramid. They are fractions of just some few millimeters apart. How is this done and cut? How is this put into play? We don't know. So I'd like for you to read then, if you read a passage or a part of the book that speaks to you. Do you have a favorite sort of book that talks about your ancestry and the linking in the real sort of Europeans? That would be useful for the audience and useful for your program. So I welcome your contribution here to tell us more about that story.
Yeah, this was an article I wrote in 2009 from it's sort of from my book, Notes and Documents of Free Persons of Color, and it says when I took my DNA test in 2003, it was to trace my maternal lines in Virginia. Over a period of 20 years, I've researched and documented my family history in the United States and Africa. I knew there were European roots, but did not know how high the percentage was. When I tested with family tree DNA, the results came back 87% European, 8% Native, 5% African. Since then, I found DNA cousins all over Europe and the U.S., mostly in southern states in the United States. My Virginia direct female ancestor was Nancy Lewis, a mulatto woman born about 1780. She was the daughter of Charles, born about 1750, and Susanna Lewis, born about 1760. I traced Charles' ancestry through John Lewis. Okay, I'm going to back this up. Charles' mother was actually a Lewis. She was a mulatto woman. They called her a mulatto woman. So Charles Lewis, my ancestor, his mother's name was Josephine. And she was some relation to John Lewis, who was born in Berkshire, Wales, and came to America about 1695. In Wales, the Lewis line is an ancient one called Llewellyn. My female line traces the same route, as it appears the Lewises were intermarried. The lines trace to the Tudors, and the Llewellyn royal families on the male side. Elizabeth of York is on my straight female line and is the mother of Henry VIII. In Virginia, my family lines intersect with Margaret Warner Washington, the grandmother of George Washington. Her mother was Elizabeth Lewis, another person of Welsh English descent. What I learned about the Welsh is they trace ancestry through the males, and that made it difficult to trace the female lines. The English did not mind having queens running through and were easier to trace my lines. My female lines came through Monmouthshire, Wales, while the male lines came through Breconshire. I like the fact that Family Tree DNA was a site which I could visit and see what, they upgrade everything. So it's always something new. Those lines go back about 45,000 years to North Africa, and it is one of the oldest European lines. Now that the results are in, I'm researching lines, for other. And again, my maternal DNA test traced my female line from North Africa into Spain, Switzerland, Russia, Germany, France, and England before landing in America. I was familiar with this Llewellyn and Lewis lines since I had traced it through a male ancestor. The female line connects to Henry VIII's mother, Elizabeth, and to the Warner-Lewis line in Virginia. The only point of interest is that my ethnicity is considered African American. The Moors entered Spain over the Iberian Peninsula and traveled throughout Europe. My understanding is that Alexander Dumas was a Moor. Anyway, this was one of the articles that I wrote about, and so this is I don't know if you can see that, but that's the Lewis. That's the Lewis crest.
Okay.
And it has a dragon, and then castles, and another. I think that's a dragon down there too. So that's basically what their crest looks like. The Lewis family.
And Dr. Marie Charles, she has researched the lines, her own lines, researched Black European lines, and tracking the use of the dragon insignias and those families that are subscribing to those emblems. And we know in Wales, the flag of Wales, we see that there is that image of a dragon on the Welsh flag.
Yeah.
So there's a Welsh connection generally with the Caribbean, with the Americas. And Dr. Marie Charles too, she is another academic that wishing to come on into the show on one of the episodes, that this dragon insignia laden with gold and other sort of precious, stones and jewels. She has been tracing the imagery, the reference to it in royal families on crests. So the fact that you're doing that's really telling, and it's good to know that is part of your ancestry, your history. Now, describe then your relatives. Do you have photos and photo array of your relatives and people who are connected to you, your ancestors, your oldest ancestors? I'd be really thrilled to be able to see images of your oldest American ancestors. Do you have those sort of materials and portraits and photographs? When photography was available, but any portraits of your ancestors? Do you have still copies and those portraits?
Most of the ones that I have of my ancestors are European and Native American, of my older ancestors, and the ones that are darker skinned. So I have all the range of pictures of, because they were, intermixing. They were in the 13 original colonies, and there was a lot of intermixing going on. And so there was a lot of light-skinned people. The natives who were enslaved were dark, but they were native people. But they were redesignated as mulatto or black, or mulatto, colored, Negro, black. Yeah. So I have pictures of dark-skinned ancestors, and I have, a lot of pictures of my lighter complexion ancestors. And I have a picture of my great-great-grandmother, the one that was brought from Africa, but when she was like 97, just before she passed, they took a picture of her, so.
It would be good to know, and for a guest, what I'd like to do is share some of that, with your permission, share some of the imagery, which I know you'll forward to me, of your, to the oldest, relatives that you can trace back.
Yeah.
And so we tend to label the colonizers and those people from Europe, as white. But the fact is, people describe them, but they didn't assign any color. Not just until this particular past century, where the run up to the 1900s, the 1900s. Here we focus to the Racial Integrity Act of 1925, where people became self-conscious and self-aware. Well, I'm not this color, so I may not make it. Or you are this color, you're too dark, you're not going to get a job. Sidelined and benched.
But they, like when you were talking about the Cabbage Patch Kids, I thought about the children that Europe sent to Australia. The poor white children that they sent. They put on a train or a boat or something and sent them to Australia. And I wondered, why did they do that? Why did they? Oh, well, probably to seed Australia,
Yeah.
So they was doing the same thing here, sending a lot of orphans to the Americas to seed America.
They chalk it up like there's religious persecution. Like, who was swinging the big axe? Who was persecuting you? And causing you to flee and run and find a new home. They had so many people coming through, and mostly through Ellis Island. You had some that would come into Chicago and other areas, but most of the people who arrived in the States, they were processed through New York. It's like design. They were just processed through there. That was overwhelming. And I was doing some research on that the Ellis Island and New York's city and state, they handled most of the immigrants coming into the States. And you ask, how come? How do these people just, show up on out of the blue like that? It's, I know the dolls, and even when they were announced, when people grew tired and bored of them, they announced another brand called the Garbage Pail Kids. Yeah.
And I've talked to people from Greece, the Greeks. They said they were not allowed in here because they were too dark. They had to go to Canada first. Some of the Italians said the same thing. They were not being allowed in because they were too dark.
And that's the thing, that we have this blended. So yes, they may not have been appropriate then, but come 2 generations, with a white spouse, then they would become, they call it the corporate color. Yeah. And so they went to Canada, and I don't know what happened, and then came in through Canada with no problem. Maybe lighter, because the people that I'm talking to are look like the normal white-looking European, but they're talking about their ancestors were not allowed in, and the Jewish people, the Jews that were not allowed in, and I don't think it was the white Jews that weren't allowed in. Well, you certainly had a lot of, segregation going on, and prejudice, racial prejudice. And then even before, when Jim Crow got started now in the 1900s, people, they had petting zoos in Belgium and other places for blacks that they said were savages. Then we had these, we're now exploring the topics of the babies and where they came from and all that. But you were recognized, if you're a certain color, or you were to have kids, and the whole nation, like in the case of Argentina, they were encouraged to lighten. You had more benefits if you were lighter. That's clear. You had more economic benefits, and you even found that some of those new whites, they play dress up, and then they acquired a lot of their lands. That had literally happened, and they were given free license to do that over those that were then classified as just Negroes and then Afro-Americans.
And they get the land. They don't work the land. It's not like they get something because they're putting their labor to it. And and I also think when you're talking about the babies, remember that. Do you remember hearing that the gypsies were still babies? That the gypsies were stealing children? I think that's connected to that cabbage, that thing that what you're talking about. Why would they say that about the gypsies stealing children?
Well, they're nomadic. They roam around.
And dark. So they're saying that the dark people are going to steal your children. That's what they're saying.
Yeah, it's racist. It's really, it's a warped sense of what's in our textbooks, the whole eugenics front, Zionism, which some people think that, it's great and hunky-dory. But I think the world has been waking up on a lot of these sort of issues.
Yeah.
And that's a good time and good place to be alive.
Right.
Now, have you come across in your studies at giants and people who were really tall, like more than sort of even 10 feet tall?
Yeah, that is okay. The Susquehanna that are connected to my mother's paternal line were called giants. John Smith described them as tall, and their legs were big as tree trunks. And he said they were dark. He said that the Susquehanna Indians were dark, and they called them Black Minqua. And that's why in one of my books, I'm writing about the Black Minqua. He said their voices were bellowing when they talked, like a wind. And what's interesting is that, sometimes, like when I go to around the tribes and stuff, and there is bellowing. There's people that are tall and they have those bellowing types of voices. Or remember, what is his name? He was a baritone, like a baritone voice. That's what I'm thinking when I hear them saying that this deep bellowing voice from these huge, and he said he was describing them as having bulbous noses and thick lips, but not as thick as the Moors, or something like that. The features were not as thick as the Moors, but these are the Susquehanna, So
well, distinct features of the Moors, like the Habsburg jaw, was elongated and protruding, and that was a sign of royalty and of the Euromoors. That's what I've read.
Yeah.
So we know the existence of giants. We can't find one in a museum.
Mm-hmm. They keep saying they're finding them in burial mounds. That's what they keep saying here in the United States. But they lie so much.
And having been to places like Orkney, where you'd see these again burial sites and mounds, it's completely. And I asked the question, what were they good for? And they don't know. but a little hole was left for someone to walk in, and then like a skylight, put in. And those grounds that the giants were buried in. But we don't get that bit of truth.
Right.
That's that. So, how many books in total have you published there, Anita? How many books?
7. I have 7 published works, notes and documents of free persons of color, which has the first edition and then the revised edition. Then I have pieces of the quilt, the mosaic of an African American family. Then Black Minkwa, the life and times of Henry Green. Along the Rappahannock, and this is about the Nanzadigo Indians who were sold as slaves by the colonizers to Antigua, and Minkwa, Onami, and Okeechobee. And then another book that I wrote, which was different, was A Nation of Flaws, Just Us in the Homeland, which is about the policing of Native people and African people, and how this police state we live in was set up from the beginning. And so it's called A Nation of Flaws, Just Us in the Homeland. That's my one of my books too.
Well, it certainly has been a fascinating journey. I mean, learning as I go, and then using the DNA evidence. So tell me about the DNA haplogroups, right?
Yeah.
Working with people with E gets lumped in and called African, but I saw Indian chieftains and men who would have the CDE haplogroup. What are some of the haplogroups that you noticed in your family, amongst your family and people?
I believe my brothers or my paternal line, which is my dad's, they said that his DNA was one of the oldest that left Africa. And he went into what is now, that DNA went into what is now the Middle East. And that there were two tribes or two people together, 2 males. One of them went into Europe and the other one went into Asia. So our DNA on my father's side went into Asia, went through the Middle East into Asia, went through India, because we have what they call a Dravidian, some Dravidian DNA, and then went through, northern Vietnam, Melanesia. I believe they went through Australia too, because Melanesia and all those are all part of that chain of, and went into South America, and we're the oldest line in South America that DNA, which I think is L3, is the oldest DNA in South America, and that's the original. They're the original or indigenous people of South America. That's my grandfather on my dad's side.
And then what about the male? Because L is usually attached to female as a group. What about the male DNA?
That is the male DNA. That's the male, the man, Adam.
But then, okay, so based on some research, what I was looking at is that Adam would have been
with somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what genealogy would say is that the L is the first haplo for women, where you have the men. There's a debate. Yeah. It could either be right. R. It can be, the males have the male and female DNA. So the L would be the female, and I have to again
go back and look at his male DNA. But this was they said this is your paternal lines that came out of Colombia South, the oldest lines in that region, and they are indigenous to that region. So, that's my grandfather's, people's lines. I forgot that the males have both, the male and female DNA, so they have X and Y.
That's true. And as I present the timeline and I have a video, other materials coming out, L would be the first, like my Polish wife, she's actually a haplogroup H. So L would be the first.
Yeah.
And then moves on in men. That's haplogroup H. And then it moves to A, B, C, D. And then it gets dicey from there because you age that sort of timeline in history at about 200, say, between 200, years. So this is it that we have to, I think, put a marker and decide for ourselves then what timeline we ought to follow.
Right.
This is quite important. So it is something that I'm going to address in top on the timeline, and I definitely would want to hear more about your stories.
Right.
So let us recap then. For your ancestry, you have a just definite linkages to Europe. You have, and that is clear. And as far as you're concerned, you can't see a high proportion of, say, whites who were in the Americas in the 1700s or 1600s.
No.
You only observe one particular woman who was and may have been African, but you have observed and as far as the people, okay, on the cabbage baby point, have you asked around any families about who their grandmothers or great grandmothers or fathers were and the origins and the ability of them to, say, trace back to Europe, because that's what we're told that they're European? Have you had any discussions with any of the white male or female persons who know or spoke about their ancestry?
The Europeans?
Well, they call themselves Europeans, or the Caucasians.
Right. They don't, when I started going, and I don't want to go too far back, but when I started going, I was going to the Mormon temple, to their library. And they were freaking out, not the people behind the desk. They were, they didn't treat me bad. But people would look at me like, what is she looking for? Why are you here? They will not discuss who their ancestors are. One, I had a sister-in-law who's passed now. She was white, she was Mormon. And she said that she had traced her, her ancestor back to France, and she was a lady of the night. And she said they was always bragging about who we were, and come to find out that that was it, So, but I have never been able to sit down with them, even the ones that I, consider me a friend, or I consider a friend, that would go into it deeply with me. But they always want to hear about my research. What did I find? But they don't tell me anything about that.
Tell me more about this Mormon. So the Mormon temple, they're freaking out. What would did they tell you, they approach that was sort of level of hostility? Why do you think that they were safeguarding? What in your mind? What do you think they were safeguarding the most?
That there was nothing there, that they could find. That's there's nothing going past a certain date in their history, or even like they'll say, oh, we're I heard we're from we're Nordic or something like that, but that's a wide range. What part, what Nordic are you? But they don't say a country. They just say Nordic. Oh, I heard we were Nordic. Oh, I heard we were,
or Viking or Vikings.
Or Vikings. They always want to be a Viking or a Nordic. Aren't they sea people? I thought they were sea people. I know that, but they don't talk about a country, in Europe.
It explains all the tattooing I see every day. It seems to be getting worse.
Right.
To each his own, but it's not for me. It's not for me. I don't have one single tattoo in my whole body. I'm 50 years old. It's not something that I aspire to getting.
Right. When we put them on, they're gangs, oh, he's a gang member. He got a tattoo. And they have them all in their face. And it's just, you just have to not even take it personally anymore. Because, I think I put a lot of the racism to ignorance and the part that people of color play in that racism on all sides, I just believe that these people who are a minority on this planet, that a lot of us who know better are scapegoating them. They know they're stupid. They know that these people are doing wicked shit, and they're backing them up.
We allow them. We're enablers. We are enablers.
Yes.
Yes.
It's crazy. I had to stop, even getting surprised by what the things that we do to, it's like somebody is sick, and you're giving them something that's making them even sicker, or you're playing into their sickness, especially their mental illness and their delusions. So.
Well, I really enjoy this. This to me is uplifting, and it's enriching. It's an eye opener about someone who. Have you had much contact with another historian who shares similar views, Dane Calloway?
Yeah, they're on. I think they're on TikTok and something else that I watch, YouTube. Yeah.
Okay.
And I think they're on my friends.
I've seen it. He's more of as a YouTuber than an author, but it's good. If I would love to get Dane's views also, with his numbers, with his stats, and with his approach and how he views it. You bring a wealth of knowledge and information. I'd like to have both of you on another episode where we look at these issues. So I think it ties in. People ask the question. They ask me, well, why are you so concerned about the history? I think that there are many answers to that. I mean, it matters. Color, it matters. Truth, it matters. What we do with it, we decide. We have a choice. But if we are told this, from white Jesus to all these images that are clearly wrong, and we are told that is gospel, that's the truth. We don't have much choice. Give us the truth and let us decide for ourselves, because the saying goes, in order to understand who you are, you need to understand where you came from, and you need to appreciate part of your history. So if you're being told and dumbed down, don't challenge. This is gospel. This is right.
Yes.
And how does that make you feel? It's okay for those who would be considered, you're white. But then how would melanated? How would you feel if you think, well, my history is not so great. I was swinging in trees, and I had no language, and I was beating on drums, and then I had to get the help of my so-called European mates. When you think of a planet where you had such high level of sophistication ruled by black and brown people for the thousands of years, and just in the 1800s you have a set of folk referred to as cabbage babies. And again, it's actual there are videos that are out there, there are postcards that people cannot ignore in the French language, in Dutch, in English, and they are like advertisements, clear advertisements. So our history has been hijacked. So why does it matter? So why are you harping on this? What are you trying to do? Well, we live in real serious inflationary times. You go in the supermarket, what you pick up 5 items and it comes to over $100. When you look at it, we need to, change things.
Yeah.
We can't have a situation where 1%, not even 1% of the planet's millionaires are black. And when you look at it, billionaires, forget it, you have less than 1%. So how come in those extreme numbers, and they call it extreme, how can you accept the fact that, you have this history which you challenge, which is not accurate. You know that you had a place in it 200 years ago. The big question is, how did it happen? How did I go? And I'm kind of answering my own question because it was a concerted effort. The Masons, the Vatican, the East India Company, which acted like they were bigger than government itself. You had multiple Freemasons. We have a lot of groups that came together to shape and distort our history. So a lot of things we have to unlearn, and we need to clear on dismissing them. So So that's
I had when you're looking at the Romans during Christ's time, I have a hard time believing that they were all white and they were just able to come there and just take over that land. Somebody in that crowd had to be black. And I'm finding out that there was blacks in those.
A lot. The planet again was black, even up to the 1700s. Ben Franklin had an essay, and he wrote that the planet was black. So if you look at a black planet in the 1700s, what about the time of Christ? It would be even the same. You wouldn't have to have where did the people go? If you had a higher, 1700s planet was black. Time of Jesus, you had mostly black, but then you had some, other different races. It doesn't make sense because you have to regress. First, you regress that number that is there, and then you move forward, and try to extrapolate. So you regress and extrapolate, and you come back and say, this doesn't make any sense. This theories, and just to make us feel conquered, inadequate, and it perpetuates a nasty cycle. Right. So, Anita. So I am pleased to again welcome you. I'd love to connect with Dane Calloway. I think his messages are clear and vivid, and he's talking about those that came over in Ellis Island, which received a lot of the white immigrants, in our time, in this modern age, in the late 1800s to the early 1900s. So these questions need to be asked because, again, why do we do it? Right. Because we are missing out on our birthright. That's right. I wish that we could say get along. But you know what? If this is our land indeed, whether it be America, whether it be in Europe, we are truly melanated people of the planet, not just African, but global people. Right. Guess what? You in control owe us rent. That's right. Rent. And so that's why it matters. It matters because we are a bare majority of the entire planet. Yet, I told you the stats. We basically miss out on the whole rich list. That means the majority of us, the vast majority of us, is just they're living paycheck to paycheck, living
right.
at the mercy of others. Those in the islands that make the call, oh, please send a few dollars, just a couple.
Yeah.
Times are tough. And so we are subsidized by our own people, but then we're living on the crumbs that falls from the table. And, you know, that to me doesn't make any sense. That's not a world that I want to raise my kids in. So we ought to know the truth, because it's only fair. It's a human right, you know, to know that truth. I mean, we're kept in darkness, to be shoved into a corner, to be told what place we have. A place? Oh, you've gotten out of your place, man. You're getting out of in this same.
Right.
You don't know your place. Who are you to tell me my place? And that's the thing. Your condescension and this kind of inferiority. So we have all these assets. We have all these indigenous, and indigenous people are roaring back to reclaim their own. And I think it's time that we decide to claim back in a peaceful, civil way. We're not I would never advocate violence. I'm a lawyer, but it's about trying to deal with what South Africa termed truth and reconciliation.
That's right.
You get it out there, and then along the way say, please give me some rent, because these are my lands. So it has to create some positive effect as to tracing history. And by finding history and tracing history, then you're able to help not just yourself, but your family and your community, because that's your birthright. Why would you walk away and say, oh, Africa, fine, but the rest of the places I'm not claiming? So this is an issue that we're a diverse, complex people. We're not limited to any point in time and any place in time.
Right.
We are blessed and globally melanated, created in God's image, not created. And I put it up, this can be the Yeshua, the Christ, driving a car, because there's a message in there. It's all mobile. It's mobile. It's Christ driving, Christ with a driver's license. So I really, I had fun. So that's it, Anita. I'd welcome you again in another show, another episode. Yeah. For now, we really appreciate you coming on, discussing history. And so it is. I will call it a night. Thank you so much. And
thank you.
God bless. Thank you.
God bless. Yes.
Thank you.
In a world of fractured stories, timelines buried, and truths erased, one project dares to ask the question, what if everything you thought you knew about history was wrong? This is GTR, Genesis, Timeline and Roots. A 5,025-year simulated walkthrough tracing a melanated Adam back to 4000 BC. Over the last decade, new revelations confirm a black origin for humanity, from European vaults to tribal memory, Babylon to Britain. This is not just history, this is a challenge, a simulation, a movement. Meet the man behind GTR Dr. Wilton MacDonald II, Caymanian, British, Jamaican, haplogroup E and stateless for 26 years. Now a global explorer, 119 countries and counting. A hedge fund lawyer, a UK chartered accountant, a seeker of the lost archives of our people. But the question remains, if all black people came out of Africa, does that make us only African? Or are we also European, Scottish, Native American, Jacobite Hebrew, Asian? GTR exists to answer that question. You've felt it your entire life, that there's something wrong with the world. A splinter in your mind. That splinter has brought you here, to GTR. Whites can't trace their roots before the 1800s. Where's ours? Where are the tribes, the languages, the kings, the queens, the true Hebrews? Where did the giants go? Where are the Neanderthals? Angels, aliens. Why do we speak in so many tongues? Was Babel just a myth? A memory? History has holes. Hollywood has lied. The system was never made for us to remember. Only 5 to 8% of people today are white. And what about the 1800 stories and postcards of the cabbage babies? But nearly all history books center their story. That doesn't add up. Atlantis, lost cities, vanished civilizations, or were they erased? Try GTR. Take the red pill and awaken to the truth of your ancestors. Or take the blue pill and keep dreaming a fantasy. GTR, a simulated walkthrough of Black Hebrew history and eschatology. This is the beginning of remembering.